Hi, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I know many of you are probably most familiar with what STEM is, but today we're going to be talking about STEAM and how students can really highlight their creativity, curiosity, and meaningful projects to stand out in college admissions. So today I'm so excited to have DJ, former MIT Assistant Director of Admissions for Multicultural Recruitment. That's a mouthful, and also a STEAM mentor joining us to share tips, stories, and strategies you can actually put into action. So, hi, DJ. Welcome back to the podcast.
So happy to be here.
I think we had you on for a different episode, but maybe it's been a while. How have you been?
Good, good. Still at Ingenious. I got to travel with Ingenious for the first time this summer. So got to meet some of my students in our Shanghai office and the Beijing office and Hong Kong. It's just been traveling, helping students with their applications and keeping up with all the updates in the field.
That's a dream, right? Traveling on the job. So, today we're going to be talking more about building a STEAM profile. I want to talk about the differences between STEM versus STEAM and what's the real difference. So, we hear STEM and STEAM being thrown around a lot, but they're not really quite the same thing. So, maybe let's unpack why adding that A or the arts really matters and how creativity is becoming just as essential as technical skills when it comes to innovation and what colleges or employers are actually looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a great starting off point. When people hear that I work at MIT, often the question is about calculus, physics, and how do I get the highest scores? And as we know, STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math covers those things that we typically think of around those fields of math and science, how the world around us works, conducting experiments, understanding logic, and quantitative or numerical analysis. Adding the arts to STEAM is really, it's used in a lot of different contexts, but generally the idea is that it is not enough to simply have kind of these hard technical skills without understanding some of the larger like arts behind where that goes. What I often tell to students is if you think about someone who graduated from a computer science program 10 years ago, they may have had zero classes on AI. They were maybe learning something that is now completely outdated in the field. And so a lot of colleges aren't saying we're going to bring you into a computer science program to teach you a coding language to go out, right? They're going to say, we want you to think about the world in which you're navigating so that when there's AI or whatever the new thing is in 10 years, you'll have the understanding and the skills to actually be able to apply the learning. You'll learn how to learn. And one, I think the arts introduces this idea, and we'll get into this. Arts can be multifaceted, but like, how do you communicate about the work that you're doing? That's art, right? How do you think about the people and the people that you're impacting with the work that you've done? How do you think about if you want to be a mechanical engineer, you can design the coolest product in the world, but if it's not visually appealing, it's not going to sell. I think when we talk about Apple, that was one of their biggest founding points, right? Was how it looked and how that completely transformed the way that we interact with computers. The other point I will put, and I know that a lot of people know, especially coming from me, someone that worked at MIT, how competitive college admissions are. I think there are so many students these days that are so hyper focused in one thing that they all blur together. There are lots of great students with great test scores. I think students who are able to say, I understand how I can apply this in the other world. I have other interests that I can intersect with my interest in STEM. I can see the connection between the arts and AI and all the things that are happening. I think that becomes really exciting for both a college admissions officer, but also, as you mentioned, an employer in the real world who wants products that are going to sell or companies to be successful or creative folks in their nonprofits or whatever students end up doing.
There are so many different art courses or art subjects. So, when we talk about the arts and STEAM, what exactly counts as the arts? Are we just talking about like traditional arts, or does it include things like design, communication, problem solving, or does it go way beyond that?
Yeah, I think the arts are truly, and I think about the beauty in the world, right? The engagement that we have in the world, and so many things are art. I consider myself to be a very artistic person. I cannot draw, I cannot sing, I cannot paint, right? But I studied journalism as my undergraduate major. I can write very well. I think there's an art to communicating, there's an art to working with people and building relationships and navigating how to provide really tough feedback to students on their essays or things like that. And to your point, I think the arts, we shouldn't be so limited and narrow. It can be the things we traditionally think of. It can look like product design. That is a science, a STEAM major in of itself. How do you design products that go out into the world, or packaging design? How many times have we gotten a really cool bag or a cool box and we're like, wow, I kind of want to get that thing because how it was delivered was really cool, or add to the experience. So yeah, I think it can look like so many different things, whether it's written language and creativity, whether it's multiple languages, whether it's music, dance, movement, creative thinking. Like it can be artistic, the way in which you approach your problems, because again, like that creativity to STEM then allows you to enter the real world. In 15 years, there's a whole new thing happening, but your creative brain is going to allow you to adapt to that new thing.
Now, I kind of want to dive into building a STEAM profile. One of the biggest questions is what really matters more? Is it research, internships, or even competitions? So, how should they be thinking about balancing all these opportunities?
That's a great question. I feel like a lot of times students and families come to me and they want me to say, if you do this research project, you'll get into MIT. If you do this internship, you'll get into MIT. And if that were true, I would be a millionaire. I would have already sold that and gotten everyone guaranteed in. So the way that I like to think about it is that MIT and all of these really rigorous STEM programs, they are looking for students who are really high achievers academically, they're engaged in learning, etc. And then once they get through the pool of students, which is a lot of students who meet their academic criteria for admission, they're then looking to see who stands out in the pool. And often it is students who have pursued the thing that they love and are really passionate about at a very high level, the highest level they can, have had really great impact in the world, etc. So do you have to do a competition to get into MIT? No. Do you have to do an internship? No. Do you have to do research? No. There were students who didn't have those things who got in, but those students were doing something at a very high level that they were very passionate about. I didn't care if it was an internship, research. I wasn't checking boxes for points. It was like, wow, look at this student who is designing this really cool robot that's going to go into the water and end pollution. And they did that through their internship project. And look at this student who's doing research in a lab, and that research could lead to making food last longer for people who are food insecure. And then look at this student who entered a competition with their research on how AI is going to help find cybersecurity issues in their school system, and they're doing that. The idea is not where it happens, it is what you're able to put into it. And then students will often respond. It seems like a lot of the people that I know got into these schools that had these things. And again, it's not, you don't have to think of it as you have to do that thing that someone else did. Whatever you are good at is what you should do. If you love taking tests, competitions could be a way for you to say, I'm pursuing the thing that I love at a really high level. If you hate taking tests, don't take competition. That's not how you're going to get your pathway in, right? If you love hands-on experiences, go get that internship. Go do that real world internship. So yeah, so I think it doesn't matter necessarily the box or the category of what you're doing. What matters is what you're doing. And another conversation I often have with students is like, wow, I got an internship at Microsoft. My question is, that's nice. What are you doing in that internship? Because you could have an internship at Microsoft, but maybe you're getting coffee for people and you're deleting old files. That's not going to be as impactful as maybe you have an internship with a smaller company, but because it's a smaller company, they really need your help and you help with the product launch. And now you've done this whole other thing. And so I think that's also another thing. It doesn't matter the category to me. What matters is like, what are you able to do within that experience to showcase how much you love something and how you're applying your learning.
Tell us more about maybe the most creative project that you've seen a student pull off that totally surprised you.
Some of the projects that stand out the most to me are like a student who applied to MIT who like in the US, there's like a big tradition with the Christmas lights, right? Around the holidays, putting those lights around your house. And every year he would coordinate like a light show with music to the Christmas lights. And they would make like a whole visual show. One, showcasing exactly what we're talking about. This connected to STEAM, like it was visually exciting and fun, but also it required a lot of technical knowledge and skill of how to put it together and understand the coding that you needed to go into it. Two, it made people smile. People were driving all over from the community to see something that was really cool. And I think the reason why I often think of that student is because I think sometimes students think that they have to do things to impress colleges. And I'm pretty sure the traditional pathway isn't create a light show, right? That'll do whatever. But that impressed me because it seems genuine. It was like this student genuinely loves learning so much and loves these things that it just seemed like that's what he did for fun. And that's the kind of student we wanted at MIT. One of my current ingenious students, he's a really great poet and loves poetry, but he also really loves environmental science research and is really concerned about climate change. And so he's both doing that research, but realizing if people don't care about this thing that I care about, nothing's going to happen. And so if I can use poetry and the arts to get people to care about this, and then I can come with a scientific solution, that's how I'll get more people to buy onto the work that I'm doing. And so I think for me, it is not always people think of, oh, I flew a rocket to the moon or I found a cure for this incurable disease. That is not what stands out in the pool. It's wow, that student seems so genuinely interested, regardless of competition and accolade, that they're pursuing this thing at a really high level. I think that's what stands out the most.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, I also want to talk about students who maybe don't have access to big name labs or elite competitions. For students in that situation, what are some of the other ways that they can still demonstrate leadership and stand out in building that STEAM profile?
It's really in your context doing things that are great. And so when you apply to college, colleges are very first, before you look at your application materials, gonna get an understanding of like, where in the world are you? Are you in a big city or are you in a very remote place? Are you in a place where everyone around you is doing science fairs and you have access to these big name things, right? The expectation for a student in Bay Area, Silicon Valley, California, where most of the parents around them work for Google and all of these high tech companies, is going to be very different expectation than a student in the middle of rural China who travels an hour to get to the internet cafe. Like the expectations are different. However, it's still the same for both students, which is within that context, within the other people around you, what are you doing that's great? And so within your context, if that means you're entering the local science fair, which is the biggest one that's around to do a research project, you're creating an online community of folks to connect with, you're doing online things until you can find that research lab over a summer program or whatever that looks like. I think it's really just finding the thing that you love and finding every and any channel you can to explore it. I think if you're like, oh, I'm just going to do the things that are around, that's great. That's not the type of student that a school like MIT is looking for. A school like MIT is looking for a student that says, wow, I don't have access to a lot, but I'm going to go to my science teacher and ask for anything I can do outside of the classroom to further advance myself. And I'm going to reach out to my older brother's friend's dad who owns a company and see if I can just maybe do 10 hours a week at that internship and really push. Those are the kinds of things that you should do in that kind of circumstance.
Now, let's kind of dive into navigating the challenges and myths about building the STEAM profile. There are so many myths about STEM admissions, like the idea that you need a major award or some huge research project to be competitive. But from your experience, what do admissions officers actually see as signs of real potential and curiosity behind the accolades?
That's a great question. Part of it too is like even within those big accolades, there are some things, for example, group science fairs where admissions officers want to know what was your part in that? Were you just a part of the group? What role did you play, etc. So I think that's certainly a big part of it. I think another thing to consider is that most admissions officers, many, do not have a scientific STEM background. I have a master in education degree, leans towards the social sciences, and writing is what I did in most of my graduate school work. My undergraduate degrees in journalism, like a writing program. I did not take advanced calculus. What I am an expert in is evaluating applications to see if students are academically admissible. I may not know all the things of multivariable calculus, but I know that it's a like very high level, college level class that when students take it in high school, it's really great to see. And so I think another part of that process is that admissions officers are leaning on experts in the field to provide that validation and expertise of a student's work. So competitions, research, those things allow validation from experts in the field that then allow me as the admissions officer to have more faith in your work. Sure, if competitions are great and that's how you're going to stand out, go for it. Especially if you're already doing a project. I tell my students that aligns with the criteria of a competition. It can be nice to have that external validation from someone else. But again, that can also be a letter of recommendation where they're validating your work. That can look like a mentor writing a supplemental letter of recommendation, speaking to your work outside of the classroom. That can look like a summer program where you're able to apply some of your learning in a setting with other peers who share your interests. It can look like so many things. And I can reassure students that I had admitted students to MIT who never did a competition in their life. There are students at MIT right now who have never done a science fair. Again, it's they did the best they could do in their context, and then they got some sort of validation wherever that may look like. The teacher recommender, again, just like someone else saying, this is actually really great. Or perhaps submitted a portfolio of their own that was evaluated by an expert at the institution that was able to say, this is the quality of the work that they've been doing.
I kind of want to touch on underrepresented students as well in these spaces. So, what's the best way for them to reflect on their experiences and share their journey authentically so that admissions officers see their true impact?
Two things. One, the admissions officer does not know that context unless you tell them. That can range from, it has been very hard to be a young woman in STEM, and I've had a lot of experiences where I've been told because of my gender, I shouldn't pursue this field. That can also look like, in the 10th grade, I got really sick for 3 months and I wasn't in school. And it's not that I didn't want to join clubs at school. It's just like I was at home. I couldn't. If you don't tell the admissions officer that, they don't know. And they're going to operate under the assumption that didn't happen. I think what is helpful is to be true and honest to your experience while providing that context. So while you may not get admitted to MIT because you're a young woman in STEM, if you were to write a supplemental essay that told the admissions committee, one of the hardest things I had to overcome was this moment that felt like it was discrimination and it felt really ungreat. And after that, I decided to start a Girl Who Codes chapter and mentor young middle school girls in my neighborhood and make sure that other young women didn't have those same experiences. That is a reason to admit you to MIT because of the work that you did and how you overcame adversity and navigated tough situations and created opportunities for others. If you were able to talk about, I got really sick and I wasn't great, so I wasn't able to join clubs, but as soon as I could in 11th grade, I got back and I did these things, that can show your tenacity. Think about, that can often be a vehicle to describe other qualities that can be really helpful for an admissions officer. I'm able to adapt, I'm able to navigate tough challenges, I'm able to interact with people of varying perspectives and opinions, because all of those things are going to be things you're expected to do when you're a first year student at these colleges.
All right, so we covered a lot of the big myths and challenges, but let's switch gears to have some fun with some rapid fire round. I'll throw out some few quick questions and you can give me your first reaction. Sound good?
That's great.
Okay, so first one, overrated versus underrated STEAM extracurricular.
My initial reaction is, what is overrated is, oh, I'm going to get in because I'm in math club or a science club, computer science club. Like, overrated. So many people do that. But I think what is underrated is, I became the president of computer science club and then got 50 people excited about computer science and started the first hackathon in my school and got people excited. What is underrated is, I just started building a robot and then reached out to the local conservatory and now it cleans up for people and helps eliminate environmental pollution. Like, yes, your extracurricular should be related to STEAM, but don't just check a box. So many students just check a box. Do something with whatever it is that you're doing outside the classroom.
Okay, next one. If you could design the ultimate STEAM club for high schoolers, what would it look like?
It would be a do whatever you're passionate about club with a bunch of resources, right? Like you could just sit around and everyone could collaborate and find something that they love and then find other people and be like, oh, I never even thought about that. But now my project connects to yours and find all these synergies. But again, I think so often people view applying to these schools as I have to check these boxes and do these things. And what I say is flip it. Find what you love. And then it is so much easier to find an extracurricular and an honor and write an essay about something that you really love and are pursuing genuinely than the other way around.
What's the most surprising project or innovation you've seen a student pull off?
One student I'm thinking of was able to design an app to help visually impaired folks learn materials more, and then was able to like partner with a local nonprofit that works with visually impaired folks and have them prototype the app and give feedback and work with them. And I think it was just really cool to see something that started as a really high level idea come to fruition and then serve a need. Folks were like, we need this. And there was that inverse relationship. That's one other thing I will say. I love when students are able to say, I worked with folks from that community or folks that are impacted to work collaboratively and use my science skills, again, with my people skills and the art of relationship building to bring it all together. So something that actually helps people and solves a problem is always going to stand out for me.
It's almost towards the end, but I can't let you go without tackling some of the most Googled questions about MIT. So we got to get into it. So the first one would be, what GPA do you need to get into MIT?
My general rule of thumb is there is no GPA cutoff. They're always going to look at the context. However, during my time at MIT, it was very rare that we ever admitted a student who didn't have all A's or at least all A's and maybe an occasional B, particularly in their STEM subjects. So again, there's no rules, there's no, we don't read it if it doesn't pass this mark. But more importantly, I have rarely ever seen MIT admit a student that did not have all A's or maybe a possible B, particularly in all of their STEM subjects.
Okay, next one. How hard is it to get into MIT?
So it's incredibly difficult when you look at it statistically. It is one of the most competitive schools in the world. I don't think, again, it's as so hard that you have to be the first place Olympiad winner of math in the entire universe, that you have to create a robot that can fly to space tomorrow. I think if you just love the things that you're doing and do them at a high level, I think there's a chance that you could get into one of those top schools. So it's very hard in terms of numbers and statistics, but it's not hard in terms of like, you have to dedicate every minute of your life to math. There are students who played sports and volunteered in their communities and hung out with their friends on the weekends and still got into MIT.
Which majors is MIT most famous for?
Definitely most famous probably for computer science. It's by far the largest and most requested major of undergraduates at MIT. In general, it's known as a very prestigious engineering school. So I think when you think of MIT, you think of robots running around and things blowing up in labs, and all of those things certainly did happen during my time there. So definitely known for engineering, also partially known for the soft sciences as well. And so just thinking about things like physics and math, like the pure science research rather, those main subjects, doing that pure academic research that maybe isn't as hands-on engineering, but is still important in the field of STEM, I think is great. And then MIT is not super well known for its humanities or social science offerings, but it does have them. I will say they are definitely more STEM oriented than other institutions and have MIT STEM lens to those subjects, but they also are offered, and people don't know that often.
Okay, that's all the questions that I have. Thank you so much, TG, for dropping all of that wisdom on building a standout STEAM profile. So, to our listeners, I hope you walked away with some concrete ideas on how you can try for yourself. And thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for having me.